So let's get started with our first panel discussion. I'll turn it over to Dr. Patrick Doran. He is the Director of Conservation Science at the Nature Conservancy in Michigan. Patrick, go ahead.
Thanks, Chrissy, and thanks everybody for being with us. As we said, today we're going to talk about our northern forests, and we're really going to talk about the conservation and management of those forests, starting with the values of what they mean to us, and then talking about the strategies that we implement across these whole northern forests to ensure that they provide these values well into the future. I have two special guests with me today. First on my immediate left is Jon Fosgitt. Jon is a co-owner of Compass Land Consultants. It's a forest management company. Jon's been working with the Nature Conservancy and me for almost 10 years now, and is a great colleague and a great forester. And Bill O'Neill. Bill O'Neill is with the state of Michigan, where he is the chief of the forestry division, and he's also the state of Michigan's head forester. So thanks, guys, for coming here today.
Thank you.
That was a great video highlighting something that really drove the values of Warren and really shaped his life and the work he does in his life. And it makes me think that it's not just those values that have shaped him. So I've been at two instances in the past couple years where I've been at a conference and once on the radio where I've heard somebody say, you know, our forests, they're just sitting up there doing nothing. And I think about this vast resource that's really not doing nothing. So how would you react to that statement? What's the nature of our forests? What are the values that you see these forests provide to nature and people?
Well, I think the most obvious value that I think people tend to talk about more frequently is that the forest products industry in Michigan is very robust. It's about a $14 billion, that's with a B, add to our economy annually. 1 in 10 manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan are based in the forest products sector. That's everybody from the logger in the woods to the truckers who take the product to and from the mills, to then people who make secondary products out of those, from cabinetry to doors, floors. So that's a huge benefit to the economy of the state of Michigan that I think people really tend to focus on. But there's so many other values that the forests bring that we probably talk less about, and we talk about recreation and what it is to live in Michigan and clean water and those kind of things. And those are the areas that I think we really need to stop and think about when we think about Michigan and the upper Great Lakes and its forest values.
So Bill, tell us about some of those from your perspective as a state employee.
We're really lucky to live in Michigan. We're a very forested state, 11th in forests in the nation. And we have lots of non-timber values that our forests provide. Recreation certainly being at the forefront. We're a trail state, one of the top trail states in the nation, #1 in rails to trails across the country, top 5 in ORV and snowmobile trails. We have some fabulous hiking trails. We've got the North Country Trail that goes from New York all the way to North Dakota and goes all the way through our state. So you can go from the southern boundary all the way through the northern lower peninsula, up across the upper peninsula. Just a great place to recreate. So our trails are a huge asset for the forests.
And a little bit about recreation too. So you mentioned that recreation, that trails, people hunt, they fish, they go bird watching these forests.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Michigan. Bill did too, and I mean, one of my first memories was we had a place in the northern lower peninsula, and like we talked about earlier, when I was a kid, we get in that car, and as soon as you hit sort of Clare and you're heading north, you just get that up north feeling, and that's sort of really ingrained in who we are in the state of Michigan. I think we've all gone up north, and we've all experienced that forest and all the things it has to offer, and it's really important to, I think.
So some of these things are easy to put a dollar value on or easy to quantify, but these things that Jon just talked about, they're there and they're very important, but it's how we recognize them and how we see them in all of our forest conservation, our actions.
Very true. And for Michigan citizens, I think forests are a part of who we are. And we do, wildlife habitat is very important. We have almost 2 million people that hunt and fish in Michigan. That's 20% of all of the citizens of the state participate in that recreation. So having vibrant wildlife habitat and healthy species is a real important part of our forests.
Do we underestimate the value of these forests in terms of us being at the center of the world's largest freshwater resource? Do we count for that enough? Do we think about that enough in our management and our activities and our conservation work?
Well, I think speaking, as a manager, we all, I went to school in forestry, Bill did, and we tend to originally think about the stand of the tree, the individual products that you can produce from those. But I think now, we look at conservation of the forested landscape holistically, and the water and the air and the trees are all part of that. A lot of the reasons that we have such clean water in Michigan is because of the quality of our forests. So when we develop management plans, we consider what the impacts on water resources are going to be. We consider how they're going to interact with adjacent landowners in different parts of the landscape. So we're thinking more holistically about the system and how we can sort of protect that and conserve that for the future.
Right. So we've talked about, the incredible biodiversity. There's hundreds of species of songbirds that turn the forest alive with their song and their colors in the springtime. There's the recreational value, the trails, the hunting, the fishing. There's the obvious timber value, and there's all these other intangibles about what we contribute to the clean water and clean air. What are you guys worried about? What are the stressors that you see now, in the past, now, in the future, that make you worried that the forests aren't going to be able to continue to provide some of these values?
Yeah, I think invasive species for all of us is a concern, and especially for us in forestry. If you look at our hardwood resource, it's really suffered from invasive species over the last couple of decades. So we've lost chestnut out of the forest, we've lost elm, we're losing ash, we're losing beech. Those are important components of our northern hardwood forests, and all of them are falling out as a result of invasive species. So how we react to that and how prepared we are really will help the forest. We need to improve our work in that area.
So what keeps you up at night, John, about the forest?
About the forest, yeah, right. Well, Bill talked about invasive species, and closely tied to invasive species is climate change. So our forests are experiencing lots of stresses from all sorts of different angles, but the changing climate is going to have a significant impact on the forests in the state of Michigan, not only in invasive species, but the way in which these forests interact with the water and the air and with each other, with the species that exist within our current forested landscape. So thinking about how climate is going to impact the forest is important when looking at our resource long term.
And so are you able to, I know in the Nature Conservancy, we think about these in our conservation. We make sure we account for the impact of invasive species or the impact of long-term changes and water availability, temperatures, species distributions. How do you think about those either in your work at the state or in your work in a private company?
Well, long-term forest planning is important now. So we can look and see where is the forest going to be as a result of climate change or invasive species. So having forest plans that take that into consideration is an important aspect of sustainable management.
As a private business owner, one of the things that we always try to assess is risk. So when I think about climate change and invasive species, there's a risk component there. So our forests are at risk because of these things. So we're constantly working on projects to help determine how much risk that we're experiencing and how much risk we're willing to take.
Okay, so we're going to jump to another video that's going to detail some of the actual actions that we take on our forests, from stand level management to large-scale conservation planning that tries to account or moderate some of those risks. So now let's head to that second video.